Okay, we're on? We're not on. Okay, so we are on. We're on. The first thing I want to ask, so I've now been on a hunger strike for 6 days. We'll be moving into day 7 in just about a minute. So, I want to first of all just ask everybody, how do I look? I want you to take a look at me. How am I looking here? I look okay? Okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, looking okay? How about the audience outside of, let's say, online? How am I looking? Any feedback on how I'm doing?
Good.
I'm looking a little thinner, but
You need a shave. Also
I need a shave. Okay, no other. Nobody is noticing this online? Well, I guess it's not that noticeable. No, I'm in. I'm fully in, right? Okay. So there are a few people. I've had my fly down ever since I left the hotel. So I stopped at the front desk, and a couple people looked at me, and you see their eyes. They don't want to say anything. They don't say anything. So I asked the clerk there, that I now know all the clerks, and said, take a look at me. Look me at how my shoes look. Look me up and down. And she said, well, your fly's down. But most people don't tell me anything, okay? Now, how would you, so John, you said my fly's down. How would it make sense for Tim to turn to you and say, John, don't say his fly's down. You're making him look bad by saying his fly's down. That would be totally ridiculous. That would not be logical at all. For somebody to say, don't tell Sam his fly's down because you'll make him look bad if you tell him it's down. We'll come back to why that's meaningful here in just a second. Okay, there's a couple things I want to mention before I start on my agenda here. So I have not asked for donations for a while. I'm not asking for donations tonight. I have a little donation jar that people have been kind enough to put a few dollars in. I really appreciate that. But I thought I'd give you an update of where we're at. So I've spent $150,000 at this point. This is retirement money. This is savings money. Prior to coming here, I'd received $85,000 in donations, which is great. That meant my expenses were down to $65,000 out of my pocket. I've been stunned, without asking for any donations. As of walking over here, there have been $6,225 in donations given since I started the hunger strike. I just want to say I appreciate every penny that has been donated. It's not just me on a hunger strike. It's not just me pouring tens and thousands of dollars into this. My friends that have the same interest in protecting our children, you have put skin in the game to the tune of $91,000 to date. That is highly meaningful. From the highest level, I just had somebody tell me this. Sam, I donated 2 months worth of my Social Security to protect children. Can you imagine that? 2 months of your Social Security? Well, I'm donating some kind of money from, I don't know what it is, but regards to retirement, but that is a huge commitment. There is one person that donates $3 a month. Every month, she's got a recurring donation, $3, and every time the email comes in, $3, I just think, I don't know who that is, but what a wonderful, committed person to protect our children. So anyway, I want to thank everybody. I'm not asking for donations, but obviously we've got more expenses coming up as we go along here. Expenses. Now, no children are here today. And I want to, anybody in the audience, online audience, if you have children, now's the time to scoot the children away. Children should not be listening to what I'm going to say in the next few minutes. If there's anybody here offended by questions that are being asked in our children's interviews, I would ask you to step away for about 10 minutes. Anybody offended by questions that I can consider highly pornographic that are being posed to children, I would ask you to scoot away right now. Okay, this could be triggering for people, so I don't want it to trigger anybody, so I'm giving you the trigger warning right now. If you're listening to this an hour from now, 2 hours from now, 12 hours from now, right now, if anything of a sexual explicit nature is triggering, I want you to step away and don't listen for about 10 or 15 minutes. Tad Walsh is the reporter for the Deseret News that covers religion. And he wrote an article. So Tad, I'm going to address you. I read your article, so did a whole bunch of other people. I thought it was a fine article. Of course, it was slanted in a certain direction. Many people said, Tad Walsh did a hit piece on you. I don't view it that way, Tad. I do have some problems with your article. Actually, one gigantic problem with your article. So Tad, thank you for writing the article on our hunger strike and spotlight. That's great. And I understand why you would have to slant it a certain way. Your employers are looking for an article that is going to be saying certain things. So good for you for doing what your job description is. Here's the issue I have. You stated this. In June, the church released a standardized set of questions for bishops to use in interviews with youth seeking to attend the temple. Okay, all well and good. But then you said this, none are sexually explicit. Tad, when I read that, I said some things in my head. Actually, I said them verbally that I'm not going to say here. That is playing games with our children. That is throwing a smokescreen across the church, across the world, that we don't have big problems. Right, you're correct. There's no sexually explicit questions unless you consider, do you live the law of chastity, a sexually explicit question? Well, I'll give you that one. I'm not going to argue on that one. But to say that none are sexually explicit hides the total truth of all the sexually explicit questions we are asking. All what the church has said is that all sexual questions outside of the ones they've delineated are okay. They didn't forbid one, not a single question. There was not one single sexually explicit question that they ruled out. That should be in the article. So, I have received some pushback from various folks, and I'll read some of it tonight, that what I'm doing is giving a bad name to the church. I'm making the church look bad. Well, I'm just going to step back here a minute. I have an open fly. Now that makes me look silly. It's embarrassing. Most people would not tell me that. But how silly would it be if someone said, Sam, you've got your fly is down, and all the other people said, don't tell Sam that. It makes him look bad to tell him he has an open fly. The church has an open fly of a policy. I am pointing out the open fly. They need to zip the thing up. But so many members of the church are saying, no, Sam wants to make the church look bad, is making the church look bad by telling him they've got an open fly. That's a ridiculous, logical argument. Tad, cut that out. Okay. And what is the ugliness of this open fly? I'm going to read the ugliness of this open fly. What kind of questions are we subjecting our children to? By the way, I had somebody stop here a few minutes ago. They're driving by. He had his son with him, but his son didn't want to get out of the car. He's a return missionary. Something happened 2 years ago where he was exposed to a extremely graphic, like I'm going to read here, interrogation, he's still recovering from that interrogation. That drove him out of the church, a returned missionary out of the church, to be treated like this. So it's still happening. It's happening today. So what are so here's the whole truth, not the half-truth that there's no questions in their list that are sexual. The other half is, and we can ask any darn thing we please. Okay, so I'm going to be extremely explicit sexually. Kids probably shouldn't be here. Okay, so we're good. This is what we are exposing our kids to, behind closed doors. The horrid shame that it puts on our children and other things it results in. Did you masturbate? That is horrendous right there. They ask my children, do they masturbate? That should never happen. No man. I don't care if it's the prophet. You do not have the right to ask my child if she masturbates. Especially at 12 years old. Do you masturbate? Do you know what a vagina is? Do you know what a vagina is, really? What were you thinking when you masturbated? When was the last time you watched pornography? What type of pornography? When was the last time you watched pornography? Does that bishop not even believe in the atonement? That is a horrid question. A question asked like that, we ought to turn that right back around and ask the bishop, when was the last time you watched it? Does the atonement mean nothing to you? What type of pornography do you want? Really, watch. We want the child to be describing the pornography they watched. Talk about shame. Do you masturbate while you watch pornography? Where and how did your boyfriend touch you? Were your nipples hard? Were your nipples hard? We're talking hardcore pornography here. The anger that arises in me when I think of what we taught to our children, an untrained man to a child behind closed doors. This cannot happen. This is an open fly. I'm pointing to the church. This is your open fly. Now, every member that is going to criticize me and say, Sam, you're making the church look bad. No, you are making the church look bad. You're making my church look bad by not pointing yourself and say, we got to get that fly closed. This is a question that should never be asked to a child. Did you get wet? Oh, yeah. Did you get wet? Oh, hell. Where were his fingers? Where was your underwear? What color were your panties? What color were your panties? You know, all these questions are disgusting, but I asked, why in the world would you ask that question? You know what the response was? That question is neat. We asked that question in order to assess how much cause the girl had in this thing happening. Really, she was trying to entice the boy if the color was red or white. You idiots. We should never be asking a question like this. Did you orgasm? Did you orgasm? Did you Do you know that once, get this, do you know that once boys reach a level of arousal, they have no choice but to keep going, that they can no longer stop their sexual advances? Really, we have bishops that believe that, and we're putting that responsibility on our children. That is the total definition of a rape culture. I didn't understand what rape culture was until recently, but here it is, a bishop teaching a child, once a boy gets aroused, it's your fault if they can't stop. I just want to say, you irresponsible idiots that would say something like that to our children. Describe the sexual positions you engaged in. Can you imagine that? A girl or a boy, a child, discussing, here, let me tell you, they're sobbing, their eyes are they're crying their eyes out, trying to figure out how they're going to describe it. Did you engage in oral sex. Oh crap. Did she orgasm? Did you ejaculate? How many times did he ejaculate? Where did he ejaculate? Did you engage in anal sex? Did the boy ejaculate in your mouth? I read that question. I cried. I don't know how long I cried. To think. A bishop would ask a question like that to a child. Did you put your mouth on her vagina or use your fingers? Did he touch your breast? Did you touch his penis? Did he penetrate you? To a rape victim. To say this to a rape victim. Did you like it? What did you do to egg him on? What were you wearing? Did you orgasm? I'm going to step back so you can view my fly. I'm zipping it up. I know that that's not a cool thing in our society. It's not a cool thing to ask our children damn questions like this. Church, zip up your fly. Every member in the church, say that you do not tolerate this. This is acceptable in my church. It should never have been, and it should not be going forward. Okay, I'm going to go do my little sign. We have an eraser. Yeah, I don't know where my eraser is. I'm into day 7 of a hunger strike. I haven't eaten anything for 7 days. I got plenty of energy to keep going with this. Church, apostles, bishops, bishops' wives, mothers, fathers. We now have 7 days and counting of our children being asked, our children being at risk of these questions being asked. 7 days and counting. We've got to stop this. Call this to a halt. Call your bishop. Say this is not acceptable. Call your stake president. Tell him we cannot do this. Now they're going to tell you they don't do it. That is no excuse whatsoever. What they're saying is they don't do it. They don't care what is happening around the world where bishops are doing this. Somebody says, look, I don't do this. It's never happened to me. That is a horrid excuse. It is. We care when it happens to somebody else. I love the gospel of Jesus Christ. I love Jesus Christ. I love his example. You know, he told all the people that said, we know you, Jesus. He said, nope, you don't. And the people that didn't realize that they knew him, he said, you knew me all along because you were concerned about the naked, the hungry, the sick, those in the hospital, those in the jail. That's who they were concerned about. Now look, you've never asked these questions. Now you need to put it in your brain that I am going to follow Jesus Christ and make sure that this stops, because all those other bishops that ask these horrid questions, we cannot countenance that. Otherwise, the millstone is on our heads, on our necks, and we are going to be cast into that sea. I am not in that situation. I am not going to be one with a millstone around my neck. Okay, so what time is it? 7:15. A couple other things. Many more sacred stories have come in over the last few days. I've been able to transfer a few of them. Story number 615 was uploaded today. A horrendous story. Some bad things happened. She went in to see the bishop. Here's what she had to say. I came into his office emotionally numb. I left suicidal. Bishops, members, apostles, Apostle Rasband, who should be here tonight to hear the people that will be talking. She left the bishop's office suicidal. Yesterday, we read a story of a boy, 14 years old. He left the bishop's office. A day later, he died by suicide with a suicide note in the miracle of forgiveness. Okay, we now have 10 fasters. So the 10th faster just sent me a message a little bit earlier today, and she said this: I am also joining your fast. I'm looking a little higher though. I am looking to God Almighty to be the hand that stretches over the church and brings protection, change, and restoration for the abused. I am asking for Him to show grace, mercy, and favor upon your endeavor. I have contacted as many of the local Christian churches and friends and neighbors that I know to ask them to join in this important move for God. May the Lord God give you strength, courage, and fill you with His truth, love, and peace. Here's somebody that is stepping up to the plate big time and putting a spotlight on what we are doing. She's calling to the churches, to her Christian friends and neighbors. Talk to your friends. Talk in your churches. Somebody is Unitarian here? Great. Talk to your church. Spread the message of what is happening in the church, that we need support to outside of our church to support this change happening. Okay, my final item here. Last night I mentioned Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks took a stand. She was arrested for what she did, but she is an icon in the civil rights movement. What she did was very helpful in moving the civil rights movement forward. Last night there was a Rosa Parks moment. A woman that works with the young women, very active member of the church. I'm going to read what she had to say. I got called into the bishop's office tonight because of my public Facebook post supporting Sam Young. I am in tears right now. How can anyone argue against his cause? The bishop agrees that the youth need to be protected and they are inviting parents to be there. But he doesn't agree with Sam Young's way he is going about it. I told him that he has tried the quiet approach. The bishop and I talked for about an hour. He is concerned that Sam is hurting the good name of the church. He supports his cause, but not his approach, which I was grateful for. They are concerned I am serving with the youth and am supporting Sam. He said he was going to pray and think over it. Huge moment for me. I felt no fear talking to my bishop. He had no power over me. I will not stand down in supporting Sam. Good for you. She's not ready to have her name made public or the ward or the bishop made public, and I'm good with that. What I would hope is this good bishop that supports our cause, just not my methods, will look past whatever methods, because it's the kids that are most important. I would ask you to step up and be a Rosa Parks. I'm looking for 10 bishops that will stand up and say, this is the truth, that our children are more important, that what we are doing is damaging our kids, and I'm willing to step up and stand up on the right side of history. So there's an interesting Rosa Parks moments. There have been many others where people have gone way out of their comfort zone to start sharing this. Good. This is what is going to make a difference. Okay, now to Elder Rasband. So, what time is it?
6:20 or 7:20.
7:20, okay. Now, do we have anybody with, so if they're kids would like to come back? No, we don't have any other kids. Uh-oh. I think he was asleep. Well, actually, you may not, could you hear me back there? Yeah, you couldn't hear me back there, right? You couldn't hear me back there. Okay, so that's good then. If you couldn't hear me, if you want to hear, if you want a little pornography, the pornography that happens in bishops' offices, then you go listen to the segment I just gave. Otherwise, skip that part of it.
We'll probably just skip that part.
Yeah, good. Skip that part of it. But I want the world to know. So it's interesting. What I just told you, the radio won't broadcast it. The TV won't broadcast it. I bought 3 ads at $10,000 a piece to send letters to the apostles in the major media here in Salt Lake City. And the second one I did, I wanted to put some of the pornographic questions so the apostles knew exactly what was going on. This is before we delivered the books. The newspaper said, we can't print any of that stuff. So here it is, in civil society, adults can't cope with these questions. And yet the Mormons, only the Mormons, it's only the Mormons, expose what adults don't want to hear. We expose our own children to, all alone behind closed doors. It is so ironic. It's just, who would, nobody in their right mind would countenance this kind of stuff. Okay, so now, do we have anybody that has a question, comment, share their story with Elder Rasband? We want to limit this down just to the bishop's interviews, the effects of bishop's interviews and stuff. Okay, so Judy? Oh, Crystal, come on up. Come on over.
Yep. So, I'm Crystal Legionnaires. One of the reasons I think it's important to talk about this is I was called into the bishop's interviews when I was 12. I was doing some things that I was ashamed of, and my parents dragged me into the bishop's office. And I was continually dragged into the bishop's office for the next 7 years to ask sexually explicit questions over and over and over and over again, whether it be about masturbation or pornography. And it's something that is not only horrible as a kid, you think that your bishop is someone who's constantly after you. The bishop, in many ways, enacted as an enabler of the abuse that my parents were putting me through. And it was unfortunately something that continued and continued, even with some, I don't know if they were church sponsored, but they even had groups for individuals who struggled with masturbation and pornography. These questions are harming our youth. They are teaching our youth that what they are is wrong, and that any little mistake needs to be publicly shamed. Every time this happened, I was refused to take the sacrament for 2 weeks, and that happened regularly. I was a young man at that point, so I was prohibited from fast offerings. I was prohibited from passing the sacrament. So I felt that I was, since I was the one that was continually being brought in, that I was someone who was wrong. Someone that had something so terribly wrong with me to do this, while not knowing that pretty much everyone else was doing the same thing, but just didn't do it. It's something that makes your individuals feel isolated and depressed and scared. And we deserve better in this church. It's about Christ and coming together, not Christ and tearing people apart. That's not what this is about. This is about loving our children and being there for them. But we need to be able to stop these questions from happening. And what starts with just one interview can easily lead to years and years of regret and feeling terrible about oneself.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Well, that's outside of our purview.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
Yes, I'm trying really hard to narrow it right down. Okay, Judy. Well, welcome, my friend. So nice to see you.
Good to see you, Sam. Hi, I'm Judy Larson, and I've been on Facebook a lot, seeing a lot of positive comments about what you're doing, but also a lot of negative ones. And they seem to run in the same kind of group of things. So I pulled some stuff together and printed it off, and I'd like to read it. One woman posted this. As soon as they sat down, she started to vent to me about the bishop. I had totally forgot how he would not let my daughter get baptized unless he was in a room alone with her, and it was a huge standoff and horrible, and he got his way in the end, but that's another story. Evidently, he came into Relief Society to talk to the women about all the men who come to confess to him about pornography. Even throughout the number 75 confessions, and our ward is super small. Awkward. But it gets so much worse. He asked the women to define pornography, and the responses included women in workout clothes and midriff exposing clothes, and no one corrected these ideas. My friend asked to meet with him one-on-one to understand what he was saying more clearly, and he continued to inform her that he brings the youth in regularly to meet with them about masturbation. If he suspects someone is doing it, he will keep bringing them in, as Crystal said. Then he will start not by asking if they do it, but how many times. If they say nothing, he threatens to open up this conversation with their parents until they confess. He bragged that the youngest child that ever confessed to him was a 9-year-old. I intend to write a formal statement to him that if he ever takes one of my children into a room alone, he will face hell from me, and I will pursue a lawsuit against him. This is happening. People who keep saying on the internet, oh, it's not happening, they don't do it anymore. That's not true. It is happening.
Let me just say, if you're anybody that's saying it's not happening again, well, okay, that's fine. If it is happening, is okay with you? If it's not okay with you, then join us in this cause so it can't happen anywhere. So it won't happen. It's not happening to you. Good. Let's make it sure it does not happen to anybody.
Okay, the second thing I want to talk about is a few days ago, a mother told a story of sitting with her 12-year-old daughter during an interview with the bishop. The mom talked about the butterflies in her stomach as they approached the office. She then related how the bishop told her daughter that she was pretty and dressed nicely, but that she needs to be aware of how she dresses. He told her that she needs to dress modestly so that she doesn't generate feelings in the boys who look at her. The mother related how after they left the bishop's office, she told her daughter that what the bishop said about modesty was rape culture, that she was not responsible for the reactions of the boys, that she was beautiful. My reaction was, how indoctrinated are we that when the bishop says something patently wrong, we don't feel able to call him on his BS right then and there, even as adults? So how much less would a 12-year-old young woman be able to tell the bishop that he was wrong and the reactions were on the heads of the males, not her? The indoctrination is so ingrained as to prevent ordinary members, let alone females, to object to what a member of the priesthood says that they disagree with. This is wrong and cultish. Now, who is the apostle who hasn't shown up?
Rasband.
Rasband?
Rasband tonight.
Rasband, okay.
Yes.
This is directly to Elder Rasband. If the 10 words that Sam Young is proposing were implemented, how would that harm the youth? We know that one-on-one interviews behind closed doors with sexually explicit questions are harmful to many. Eliminating those practices would harm children. How? I read a lot of comments from active Mormons who say that their children weren't asked those questions, and if they were, that there was no harm done. Sam has hundreds of stories of the harm done. Parents who no longer have their precious children because of the shame and self-loathing causing them to commit suicide. Losing their children from shame and self-loathing. I propose that eliminating the practice of so-called worthiness interviews alone, behind closed doors, with sexually explicit questions would harm not one child. So what is preventing you, Elder Rasband, from implementing this policy change that would eliminate a source of harm to our precious children? When talking about this issue, you may be in the company of survivors of sexual violence. Some survivors don't like to be touched because it feels like the predator is touching them again. I offer this suggestion. If you are moved to possibly hug, touch the arm, or hold the hand of someone who has disclosed a traumatic experience of sexual violence that they have endured, ask them first. Is it okay if I hold your hand, touch your arm, or give you a hug? We also need to teach our children body autonomy and personal boundaries. Then with that kind of tool in their toolkit, they'll be able to tell the bishop, no, I'm not going to answer those questions. I'm not going to go behind closed doors. I want an adult I trust in here with me. I have some relatives in Michigan, I grew up there, who don't know me very well, little children, and their mom will say, go hug Aunt Judy. And they kind of look at me like, do I have to? They don't know me. They see me every couple of years. So last year, their 10-year-old son, I watched a football game and he was there with his buddies, and his mom said, go hug Aunt Judy. And I gave him a fist bump. And he smiled and gave me a fist bump back. And maybe that's what we need to do. Teach the kids they don't have to hug Grandma and Grandpa. They don't have to kiss Grandma and Grandpa and Uncle Joe. They have control of their own bodies and their own minds. Thanks.
What's your name again?
Judy Larson.
I hugged you before.
I know you have. Many times. Many times.
So Judy came down here. So last December 2017, 1st and 2nd, my mom and I, we were trying to get that petition rolling, so we came down here in the cold of early December, and Judy showed up both days for us. I was very, very nervous about that. Not as nervous doing this, but getting started, that was really nervous. So I really appreciate your support all the way back then.
Yep. And we were at the march too.
Yes.
We marched.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if we can get a question finally from the internet.
Yeah. Somebody wants to know if you have a Venmo account and the best way people can donate.
Oh man, you know, I'm not internet stuff. I don't know how to do all that stuff. But if you go to my website, there is a donate button. So you go to protectldschildren.org and there's a button. And I guess we need to figure out Venmo, but we don't have that.
Another listener wonders, why isn't Child Protective Services called in instances of abuse like this? Why are people going to bishop?
Well, I think that's a good point. I think it's been the tradition in our church and also in the handbook that if there's abuse, it should go to the bishop, and that the bishop should be the one responsible for handling that. I don't think we should be doing that anymore. The church has changed a little bit on this. Last March, right before our march, they did make an announcement making some changes regarding abuse, but that's not where I'm at, the abuse stuff. I'm not that familiar with it. But here's what I would say, that if I was to do this again, I told my stake president and bishop this in one meeting, and they kind of scoffed at it, but I'm serious about this, that if I was to do this again with my kids, I would tell the leaders that there will be no one-on-one interviews and no sexually explicit questions. And if you do that, I will call the police. It's not a negotiable thing. There's not a 1 strike, 2 strike, 3 strike. It is, you do that to my child, I'm calling the police. You do not ask them if they masturbate. Okay, another question?
Elder Rasband, should we change activities requiring worthiness interviews to be eliminated until 18 years old?
Okay, so here's a good question for Elder Rasband. Should we change activities that require worthiness interviews, like going to the temple, until a child is 18 years old? That's a great question. I think that's a super question. Even then, we shouldn't be asking sexually explicit questions. Okay, John, you had?
Yes, one listener asks, how's your health? How are you doing? Another asks, how much weight have you lost since starting?
Well, how's my health? I'm doing super. So I have plenty of energy. My mouth gets a little dry for this couple of hours. But other than that, I'm doing super. How much weight have I lost? Well, I don't know. I don't want to step back, otherwise you'll see my fly is not open. I have no idea. I prepared for this for a month in advance, and during that month I lost 14 pounds. So from then until, I'm sure I haven't lost that much weight. There's no scale at the hotel, so I'll find out in a couple of weeks. Okay.
Do you mind if I share a couple stories with my family?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So, Sam, super proud of you.
Thank you, my friend.
I'll just tell a couple of quick stories about family members who are protected, and my message is about how the church's policies hurt members who are believing. So when I was excommunicated, there was a close person in my life who, interestingly enough, decided that they wanted to stay faithful in the church, and Margie and I were super supportive of that because we want people to make that decision and have their own journey. This person graduated from their high school experience, and when they were doing their seminary graduation, their bishop called them into their office, and in the seminary graduation interview asked this person if they masturbated. And this person, in spite of our excommunication, was committed to the church, and it was at that moment that this close, dear person to me decided to leave the church. They just said, if a bishop's going to ask me this question behind closed doors, I can't attend this church anymore. So the church lost a really valuable, special member because they made this choice. A couple other people, I have another family member who was active in the church, went through high school, was ready to serve a mission, and was asked by their bishop if they masturbated. This person admitted that they did, and the bishop told them that they weren't worthy to serve their mission, put them through so much shame that they decided not to go on a mission. And so the church lost a wonderful potential missionary through this action. And this person had so much guilt and shame that once they married, they were put through the ringer by their spouse. They were called sinful, they were called evil, they felt a lot of guilt and shame. And ultimately this couple, through these experiences and others, have just decided that the church isn't for them. And how disappointed this young man was, specifically, to find out that thousands and hundreds of thousands of other young men were able to serve missions even though they were doing the same behavior. But because this bishop happened to enforce this rule in such a shaming way, he was shamed and ostracized in front of his whole community when hundreds of thousands of others were allowed. It's particularly disturbing just to know that this policy is so arbitrarily applied. And then finally, I just was talking to my father. You and my father were business partners for 10 years or so in Houston. You probably knew my sister Gina.
Of course, very well.
My sister Gina passed away a year or two ago. Loved Gina, she was faithful until her dying day. I never knew this. When I knew Gina when I was young, Gina had really long hair, she had glasses, she almost looked like John Lennon. She was maybe wasn't always as happy as I might have expected her to be, and I never quite knew why. Later in her adult years, she started smoking and left the church, and I found out from my dad just recently, he just told me the story, that when my sister Gina was a teenager, she was brought into the bishop's office in Northern California. She was asked if she masturbated. She was sexually shamed for that, and my father told me she was never the same after that interview. And she remained faithful to the end, but she had a really, rough young adulthood life. She married a non-member because she felt so much shame. I think she maybe felt unworthy to marry in the temple, and her life was never the same. So those are three active believing members who the church hurt, who could have been maybe more positively contributing, happy, fulfilled members. So the church isn't just hurting children, they're hurting members that could be valuable assets to them if they were to change their policies. So I just wanted to share those stories.
Well, thank you very much, John, for sharing that. I appreciate it. Thanks
Good luck,
very
Sam.
much for your support.
Keep up the good work.
So, somebody somewhere wrote, maybe it was Tad, I don't know, can't remember, that my agenda is to get people to leave the church. That is absolutely not my agenda. I don't want people to leave the church. But by having this policy in place, it is causing people to leave the church. Story after story after story. Every single night, I hear a story of a family that left the church over this, or a son that left the church over this, or a daughter that left the church over this. The stories that I went through this morning, yeah, several of those stories, this was it for them. They left the church because of these shaming, horrid interviews. Okay, do we have somebody else that wanted to share something? Okay, Jill, you had something you wanted to share. And how are we doing on time? 7:42. Okay.
Okay. This is very brief, and you've heard some of it a little bit before. But
Well,
I'm
good.
gonna say
This is
it
for the
again.
world.
Okay. So basically, it's not my experience, but I will tell you that this is about an attorney who's in New York City, and his whole livelihood is based on protecting children. And this is what he has to say about our society. He says, "Our society has devolved to the extent that we tolerate unprotective, even violently abusive parents. It also has devolved to the extent that we tolerate predators within a child's circle of trust, in schools, in clubs, within religious organizations. It has devolved to the extent that abusers, even when they have been identified, are permitted further opportunities to prey. It has devolved to the extent that we insist on the rehabilitative potential of those who viciously injure, sexually assault their own children, and it has devolved to the extent that we permit convicted predators of children to be released and walk among us." Basically what he's saying is, it does happen within religious organizations as a whole, as a society, but also, he's also talking about the fact that he said in here, it's kind of gross to say, he says we are growing our own victims, and I know that you heard that before. We're growing our own victims. That's really, really powerful. So watch that within the family, and watch that and how that evolves within the church, and it should be devolving. We should be getting rid of it, as you've said. So that's what I wanted to say.
Well, good. Thank you. That was a great quote.
Thanks.
And yes, I'd heard it before and still like it. Okay. Anybody else?
I received a report that Elder Rasband was throwing out a baseball at a Major League Baseball game tonight. So maybe that must be
Well, good for him. Throwing out a baseball at a Major League Baseball game. Well, fine. You know, they've got their stuff, important stuff to do. Hopefully, they'll get around to protecting our children. Any other questions online?
Can you answer why bishops and mission presidents haven't been prosecuted?
Well, I think we're in the process of a bishop kind of being, first of all, many bishops have been prosecuted. So we've got lots of records. Last year was like, I don't know, 10 bishops. I think most of them were here in Utah that were either arrested, sentenced, or well, whatever. There was a prosecution in going on. So it is happening. And those bishops are being prosecuted for sexually assaulting kids. In Houston, 8 months ago in Houston, a first counselor in a bishopric was arrested. Now he's going away for a long time. He was arrested because he was grooming kids, sexually assaulting them. Some of the kids in the church, sexually assaulting them. And while he did that, he made movies. He was selling the movies of who he had assaulted on the internet. This guy's going away for a long time, but he was a first counselor in the bishopric. There's no way we should be giving access to our kids over to anybody. He looked like a great guy to everybody. Everybody would look at him and think, well, looks like Sam Young. He's a good guy. Don't let your kids behind a closed door with me or anybody. You don't know where they're at. So it is happening. Yeah, it's happening. Here's another problem. Many times, if it involves a church official, there will be a non-disclosure agreement. So there are many cases where Bishop was, so in Texas, I had somebody contact me last January, and they said that it was a $300,000 settlement that was involved. The bishop had abused them and several kids, and we corresponded for just a little bit. Said, you know what, there's too much risk here. And this is an anonymous communication because he got a $300,000 settlement. Not him, but everybody, all the kids who were involved, paid by the church. Okay, what time were we at? 7:46. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Let's see. Yes.
Sorry. I just want to make a comment because I've gotten several messages from people since I've been here every day with you. As far as victims who are struggling, because even though maybe they understand that it's not super realistic that the apostles will come sit here, every time they see that, it's really almost like re-triggering. It continues that feeling like my story wasn't important, I'm not being heard. And so I don't know if you want to comment on that, or I just want to say that we honor that, or we recognize that. And I do think that there is something very sad about just this issue not being taken more seriously.
So my dear friends who feel a little bit triggered that an apostle doesn't come here, let me just say I recognize that. I hear you. And I have total empathy for that. I didn't go through the trauma that many of you went through. But I've dedicated my entire life to this church. When you see what I'm doing here, and have done for the last many months, I've done this my whole life. This is not something new. I've done this for my whole life for the church. I got a calling. I am going to be spending hours upon hours upon hours on that calling. For me now to come here and realize all the stuff we've done, all the people who have been harmed, the thousands of stories that are in my head, in my brain, in my heart, and in my soul, and to have an apostle not even deign me with a phone call, an email, a letter. I'm no longer asking them to meet with me. I'm asking them to meet with you. Yes, that hurts to see what my church is made of, what the leadership of our church, where their hearts are. Their hearts are not with those that have been traumatized and harmed and scarred by their very policies. They should be right here. No, that I get that. That hurts me too every day when I look at that. I go home and I'll see a poster up on our website, our Facebook page that says failed to show or no show for Elder Rasband. You know, I look at that, that does not make me feel good. Everybody says, nah, they're never going to show. They're probably right. But you know, I'm saying in my heart, I hope they are the men that I think they are. I'm hoping they're the men that care about you, who are triggered when you see they don't show up. But I want to keep pressing this. I want to keep pressing and pressing, hammering and hammering, spreading this message far and wide that the apostles, I hope they're going to listen. If they don't, we're reaching out to the members to have them listen. The bishops step up, 10 bishops step up and say, yes, I want to be on the right side of our children. And if they're not going to listen, then I'm reaching out to everybody outside of the church. Spread this far and wide. Everybody should know, should be forewarned, so that when those missionaries show up on their door, that non-member can say, you know, you guys are nice kids. I hear you got a good church, but I'm concerned about this policy that you're the only folks that take a child one-on-one behind closed doors and can ask any question that is on this list. They need to be forewarned. I would not feel good about myself watching people come into the church thinking, oh yeah, they knew nothing about what is coming up for their children. No, people need to be forewarned. So I'm reaching out to those 3 areas. I'm hoping, I have hope. I'd like to say it. I have confidence in. Okay, I just had that. I have hope. I have confidence. I have hope. I have hope. These men are the men who I really think they are. Okay, so there's a long response to what you had to say.
And I would just add that it's not adequate, but I hope that there's some level of reframing that we're here, so many people are here, and we are brothers and sisters in this thing, and so I would hope that that's being... So you're still
And we now have a place. This is now coming out in the open. What has happened to you, we can talk about. We are talking about. We're raising it to the high heavens. This stuff happened to you. It was wrong. We know it was wrong, and we're not going to let it happen to another generation.
Question for both of you. Wait. Okay. Rena asks, what can we do in divorced family cases when one parent doesn't mind the one-on-one interviews and the other does? The non-attendee says we can't protect them. So, Natasha or Sam, what would you recommend to someone who's in a split family where the parents disagree? How can the non-participating parent protect the child?
Well, hopefully mediation, services can help parents come to these conclusions. But I do think that at some level, the ultimate boundary is a legal one. And I do think that this needs to be, it is a risk to children to be on one-on-one interviews, and I think that there just needs to be legal intervention. And usually people who are struggling in divorces with custody issues of this sort need to include their lawyers in those types of decision makings. That would be my direct.
And
yeah.
So today we have a lot of evidence of the harmful effects of these interviews. I would suggest that you access, go to the protectlbschildren.org, access the stories, help explain to your spouse, this is what we're putting our children at risk. I'm not willing to put our children at this risk. How can we work out a situation so that our children are totally protected? And frankly, as a dad, if I was divorced and I was not in that ward, I would be sending a letter to that bishop explicitly saying you cannot do this or this, and if you do, I am going to call the police on you.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be through the spouse. It can be directly with the bishop. And there's PhDs, like dissertations now on sexual shame, the definition of sexual shame, the effects of sexual shame. If anybody needs those types of resources, I'm more than happy to help you access those things. But yeah, there's real harm here. It's just like you can't if you're divorced from somebody that has a predator in the family, you have a right as the non-custodial or the joint custodial parent to have a say in where your children will be and alone with who.
Larry.
Hi. So there are people who may not have seen this before. Introduce a friend or speak with knowledge, and not everybody's going to know.
Okay, so this is Natasha Helfer Parker. I'm going to have her give her
what are you going to do?
all the letters that compose her licensure.
Oh, okay, all right. So I'm a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist, have been for over 20 years, have primarily worked with a Mormon clientele throughout my entire career. None of your questions were new to me. In fact, multiple times have I heard those types of questions, so you didn't surprise me with any of them, which is sad. And then on top of it, about 7 years ago, I went and got my certification in sex therapy, so I'm very familiar with sexuality issues, sexual shame, and some of the ways that we're really what I call cinifying normal sexual human development in ways that are inappropriate and unnecessary and tragic.
So Natasha has worked for years with hundreds and hundreds of kids and adults who have been horribly harmed
and
by
are
these
suicidal
interviews.
And are self-abusing, and no, that does not mean masturbation, Elder Callister, and are in clinical depression or having anxiety issues, are having PTSD issues, or having social anxiety issues, all kinds, marital issues. I could go on. So this is not a small thing, and it has lifelong repercussion for many of our members, many who are believing and don't even understand that these repercussions are affecting them. which is of course also very sad and tragic. It just, it's part of our cultural complexity, and it's, out of all the wonderful things that we do, this is unfortunately one of the things that we're very, very harming in.
Okay, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Natasha. We appreciate your support a lot.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up here, but I want to wrap it up by, I'm on the hunger strike. You guys are on the spotlight, doing the spotlight, spotlighting this. So what can you do? I'm going to repeat again several things, easy things you can do and hard things that may put you in the Rosa Parks place for our movement. Number one, go to the Facebook page, protectldschildren.org. No. Protect LDS Children Facebook page. Like it. That helps in a big way just to have that like. 2, share the petition. If you have not shared the petition, or if you've not signed the petition, sign it. And share the petition. You can find the petition at protectldschildren.org. There's a petition, share the petition or sign the petition button. Those are 2 easy ones. The next is to share what is going on everywhere. I've seen several, actually I'm missing most everything. I don't have time to see all the stuff that's going on. But what I've seen is many people writing their own posts about this and then sharing something. Sharing one of a video like this is a perfect thing. A fellow did a wonderful exposition on what we're doing and posted it this morning. It's now posted on on our Facebook page. So share everywhere you can, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, I don't know what other things there are, but share them there too. Share everywhere you can. I had somebody tell me today I am sharing like cray-cray on Twitter. Well, good for you. By the way, had to go to the store to get something, and while I was at the cashier looked at me and said, "Do I know you?" I said, "Well, I don't know. Do you know me?" I said, "You look familiar." I said, "Did you see me on TV?" And then I talked about what we're doing. I said, "Oh yes, you're Sam Young. You are all over Twitter." I thought, and then she told me her story. Baptized 4 years ago, and her bishop, how in the world does this happen? Asked her if she masturbated. She said, "That's none of your business, and if I can't be a member, if that's your problem, if you're concerned about it, not mine." Something like that. The other thing you can do, talk to your family members, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to your schoolmates, talk to your co-workers, talk to everybody about it. If you're not a member of this church, talk about it in church this coming Sunday. Talk about it in Sunday school. Let people know what's going on right here in Salt Lake City. If you're in Salt Lake City, or it doesn't matter if you're in Scotland. Somebody posted a wonderful thing in Scotland. Talk about it in Scotland, in your churches, synagogues, mosques. Is there anybody you can talk to about it in a mosque? John, can you talk about it in a mosque, please? Let's see. Here's something else you can do. If you remember the church, call the temple, put the apostles' names on the temple prayer rolls. Put their names there. Pray for the apostles that they will release the revelation they've already received. My wife went to the temple a week and a half ago and put my name on the temple rolls and the apostles. In just a few days, she'll be here, and she'll be going across the street to the Salt Lake Temple to put the apostles' names on the temple roll, and my name too, but the apostles, so they'll make this change now. So there are several things that you can do to support this movement. Thank you. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.